Welcome to another episode of Behind the Screen. Today we're talking to Phyllis Zegers, who is from Oregon, and she's going to tell us a little bit about her connection to the podcast Unclaimed. Phyllis has an incredible story, a philanthropic story, something that maybe those of you out there that are family historians might really connect to. The idea of taking something you find in records and making it available for a wider audience and helping people connect with their family history story. We're really excited to have Phyllis here. Phyllis, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so this is going to be an episode that's after someone has maybe listened to all of the podcasts that we've called Unclaimed, and you are part of that podcast. Do you want to tell me a little bit about what you do in Oregon as far as family history? Are you a professional genealogist? Have you been on Ancestry a while? Tell me a little bit about your background in family history.
I've been doing family history for over 20 years, and I've been doing this project since 2013. In the beginning, when I was researching my own family, I found a distant cousin who had died at Oregon State Hospital. And so as I'm looking through all the information that I can find, I keep running into information about unclaimed cremains, about 3,500 people whose ashes were never claimed.
Ashes that were left at the Oregon State Hospital. Give us a little bit of an idea about that story and what that all was about.
Those cremains were discovered in 2004. The hospital had misplaced them, forgotten that they had them. For whatever reason, they were rediscovered, and some publicity came out about that.
You mentioned the cremains being discovered. Do you know the story of how that happened or who it was or how that came about?
Peter Courtney was the Senate president at the time, and he was doing an inspection of the state hospital. And as he was walking around, he saw a shed, and he asked, "What's in the shed?" And nobody knew right off the top of their head, and he says, "I'd like to go in there." And they went in, they found all these cremains, and everyone was blown away. They had no idea they were there.
Wow.
And in there was the log.
With the cremains in this shed?
With the cremains.
Was it outside, the shed outside, or is it in the basement?
It was outside, and it was on site at the hospital. So he, being the Senate president, being in a very powerful situation, he said, "We need to do something about this. We need to find honor and dignity for these people." And he got the ball rolling for a memorial. Also, he managed to pass 2 laws that allowed these people's names to be put online because, the confidentiality issues were in place.
So he made it so we could find these stories and these people.
Absolutely.
Okay, so your goal, and this was just something philanthropic that you felt really strongly about making this available for people by putting it on Find a Grave, right?
I did. And that's what I started doing. In the beginning, my goal was strictly to write up their bios, to honor them, to post it on Find a Grave so it'd be available in more than just my file. So then I found that I could find living relatives, and that's what I began to do.
Over 3,500 canisters, copper canisters, of ashes of people who did not have family to claim their remains to bury them. And so you found an idea and a place on Find a Grave to put that information so that people could then discover their family member.
Right, and not all of them were missing family. Some, the family knew of them, the family knew they had died, but for different reasons, they chose not to claim the cremains.
And that's really interesting you say that, because my foray into this story is kind of the other end. So you came at it from the end of discovering these records and death records and stories about all of these people. I was researching a specific family. I was looking for the family of Leland Wright. When I was researching this story, essentially it became an Oregon Trail story. The family left Texas. He was born on the way, and then they came up. It took a long time to get to Oregon. But then they settled in the area kind of near where the hospital is, like that little area, and had a big family. So Lee was the oldest. And when he was about 18, he left home and he never came back. I don't know if it's he just had a wandering spirit or if he had an experience with his family, didn't want to be with them, but he was very removed from the family. So much so that the person I was helping knew nothing about any of this information. They didn't know Lee's father's name because Lee died when his son was about 2. And so the 2-year-old son never heard any of the stories, right? So they were wondering, who is his family? So this whole journey led me to the name of his father, James Wright, and it led me to a newspaper article. It was James Wright writing to the newspaper, looking for his daughters and trying to have them come to see him. And he said where he was, and it was the Oregon State Hospital. I was shocked. I was like, okay, what is this Oregon State Hospital? I knew nothing about it. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know any of the story you just told us. So I looked it up and the first thing I saw was the facade of this building. So I was shocked because I saw the facade and it looked very familiar. And then I researched and found that the facade, the front of the building, is actually what's used in the wonderfully critically acclaimed film One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. That's the hospital. And so Oregon State Hospital was used as that hospital with Jack Nicholson and the whole gang, Danny DeVito, all of those people in the film. And it's the 50th anniversary this year of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So it's just kind of worked out that way. We're releasing this podcast like the 50th anniversary of the film. We did not plan it. It just kind of happened, which is kind of amazing. But saw that facade, was kind of in shock, kept researching. And then I came across exactly what you said, how there was media around these canisters of these cremains that were unclaimed. And there was just a little part in my heart that was like, oh, I wonder if James is there. I wonder if James is one of them, I thought, let's just do a search and see if James Wright happens to be in this list. Like, what are the odds? I don't know. So I type it in and there is a James Wright. And I thought, okay, James Wright's kind of a common name. So I don't, necessarily think it could have been my James Wright. So I then went to Find a Grave. And you had posted his death in Find a Grave. And you had his death record that you had pulled from the archives.
Right.
So tell me about pulling those records from the archives. What is that? Do you go and order them? How did that work? Because now those death records are on Ancestry.
Right.
But when you started, they were not.
No.
So what was your process? Did you have to go somewhere far away? What was that all about?
Well, I live in Roseburg, which is about 2 hours south of Salem. So periodically, I would go up to Salem and with a long list of people that I was going to be researching. So I would ask for their death certificates. And I'd sit there and spend a couple hours taking pictures of death certificates. And then I would take them back and research the family. But it was very enjoyable to be at the archives. They have so many different documents, and they also have documents that are big books that show entrance of people into mental institutions and their discharges, or records about why they were institutionalized and things like that. So there are other things, so many other things at the archives, but mainly I was there to get death certificates because that was really my springboard into doing any research, because it has where they died, it has when they died, it has what they died of, it has a lot of times their parents' names. So that information was really ready to go. And in a way, in the beginning, I felt like I had the final chapter here. Um, I knew what became of this person, but then when I started researching them, I realized that I could find living relatives. And so, in a way, a whole new chapter was written. It ended up to be in a happier chapter.
Yeah, and that okay, I love that because as genealogists, I think, or family historians, either one, we think about we're researching those who have gone before, right? And what their lives were and who they were. But to go the other way, to do descendancy research, that's a whole different skill set, whole different approach on how to do it. And you're contacting people who are living who don't know you.
Right.
And so that can be kind of tricky. Tell me, like, what was the first time? How did you decide to do what you did?
Well, it was so clear to me that there was this living descendant, and I don't even remember who the person was that I was researching when I had that aha moment, but I just felt like I should really tell them. Maybe they would want to know. I reached out and wrote a letter, and I included my biography that I'd written. I also included the death certificate, and um, I wanted them to also be able to prove to themselves that it was real because it was very reasonable to me to believe that they had no idea who this person was. So I wanted to give them enough information where they could talk to other family members, say, hey, is this legit? And that is one of the things that people have told me the most is first, that they were shocked to get the information, but that their first initial thought was, this is a scam.
Oh, every time. I totally feel that. For my job, I'm constantly reaching out to our customers, living people to try to connect them with their story. And the idea of trying to get them to believe that I'm really who I say I am. I don't want any money. This is all about bringing a family together. Usually it's a good story. You included your biography, you included information about their relative as well as the death record.
In the very first paragraph, first off, I apologized for if it was inaccurate or intrusive, because those are my biggest worries, that people would find them intrusive and that there might be some inaccuracies there. So then I go on to explain how they were connected to this person.
Yeah, because it's probably not extremely close. They're probably adjacent in some way, cousins or aunt, uncle, maybe, or are they actual children or grandchildren?
It's a mix. I do find a lot of grandchildren, great-grandchildren, 2 times great-grandchildren, a lot of, um, great nieces and nephews, some first cousins 3 times removed even. I have found brothers and sisters of people who have died. In a couple cases, I have found the parents of someone who's died. And the closer the relationship is, the harder it is for me um, to feel comfortable contacting them.
Mhm.
Um,
Because they may have already known they died there, and there may be a reason why the remains have been unclaimed. Perhaps it's a financial, reason. There could be a relationship situation that you're not aware of. There's so many different reasons, right? And so you're walking into this private family experience, and I think you're doing it very well. You're being very respectful of the family, and I'm assuming and there's people react in many different ways. They could say, "Thank you so much, I'm not interested." They could be rude. They could be so grateful. You've probably experienced all of those things, I would imagine.
yes, the whole spectrum. Even though I will say in 13 years of doing this, I've gotten 3 angry phone calls in 13 years. So I'm pleased with that.
Those are good odds. That's really good. Those are really good odds. Well done. I think that's a testament to your approach and a testament to your work. Do you know how many different people you've reached out to over these many years?
Oh, thousands and thousands.
Oh my goodness.
When I do identify someone that has living relatives, I will send out a letter to anywhere from 1 person to 20. And I used to have these myths about who was most likely to claim. And I thought the closer the relative, the more likely they were to claim. That doesn't really seem to be the case. Um, and I thought if they lived in the Pacific Northwest, they were more likely to claim. And that doesn't seem to be the case. But the one thing that really does close the deal is if I can put a photograph of the person in the biography.
Okay. How do you get a photograph? What do you do?
Well, nowadays, I can get the medical file.
From the hospital?
I get it from the state archives. The hospital has placed the medical records in the state archives.
Oh, is that recent? Did they just do that?
They did that several years ago, but now they will send these to me digitally.
Wow.
And so it's like Christmas.
I can imagine. I'm a genealogist. It's like the email has come. Oh my goodness. And they have a photo of the person.
In almost every case, they have
Okay.
a photo at the time of intake.
Yes.
And when you can put that in the biography and somebody can look in the eyes of this person, I think it makes all the difference.
Yeah, they become a real person. They're not just a name on a page
Right.
or a story that's been told to them. They're someone that belongs in their family.
Right.
Once I found the death record for James Wright on Find a Grave, because you put it on there, I actually reached out to you. And this is about 10 years ago that I reached out to you and asking if you knew more information. And I found that I was able to write to the hospital at the time and get the medical file. And so we had to prove relationship of his grandson and all of that to get it at the time. And the whole file was sent to me. All of the different things that he was considered ill for or he experienced while he was there. And it had a photo. He looked sad. And it just, again, it broke our heart because the family somehow was broken. The daughters were married and kind of moved. And so the family just kind of dispersed. And that's why he wrote in that newspaper, he was looking for those daughters. And it was really sad too that he wrote it just before, maybe 6 months before he died. His cremains were unclaimed. So I got in touch, of course, with the person I was helping, let them know. And I'll never forget when I revealed the story to him, I said he was forgotten and he was left. And he said to me, well, he's not forgotten anymore. And he had the cremains sent to him in Florida, and he's going to bury the cremains next to the son, Leland. And so there was just a beautiful ending to that story. There's a lot of tragedy, a lot of hardship, but to know that there's someone on the other side that wants to honor that person with a burial, I think is really beautiful. Have you ever experienced any of the burials or funerals or any of the people that you've connected with?
A lot of them, they will share with me what they decided to do in the end and what it meant to them. They may have had a family reunion based on, hey, we found Uncle Joe, and maybe getting together with cousins that they hadn't seen in 20 years. And so the things that it does for the living people is one of the things that I enjoy the most. And they'll talk about the different decisions that they make for, what am I going to do with the ashes? They're not sure. Should they bury him? Should they bury him with his wife? Did he really like his?
I know, right? You don't even know why. You don't know the why. You only know the now, right?
And then the idea of scattering ashes, people have different feelings about that.
Yeah.
And so, they share with me some of their process and their thinking process about this, and they stay in touch that way. So I do hear about a lot of their decisions in the end, and they'll send me pictures of, where final resting place if this person happens to be.
Yeah.
And
Well, I mean, I know that the only reason I found as quickly and as succinctly the information about James is because of what you had shared on Find a Grave. I think Find a Grave is a beautiful place to honor people and their memory. It's free. Anyone can add to things. And you had added this amazing death record that I would have to order at the time. But now I imagine it's on Ancestry. So tell me, has that changed the game for you?
oh, so much.
Okay.
So much. Because now I don't go up to the archives anymore. I can get it online. I can get the death certificates online, but I can also get their parents' death certificates. I can get their wife's death certificates. I can get their children's death certificates. So I can find out what happened along the way with the other people in the family and things that might have impacted this person. Maybe even explains a little bit about why they're in the institution.
Mm-hmm.
A woman who's had children die in close succession.
Yeah.
And then she's hospitalized. You start to wonder.
Women, I think, are one of the group of people that I think were most misdiagnosed. I'm sure you've come across a lot of those kinds of stories in your research. One of those stories that we talk about in the podcast is connected to the acclaimed poet, Sylvia Plath.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit about who she is and what you discovered there.
Sylvia Plath is, she was a writer, and she was also very troubled. She had mental health struggles. Her father was a big factor in her life, and his name was Otto Plath, and his mother was Ernestine Plath, and it was Ernestine who was at the state hospital. And so I was able to make the connection between Ernestine and Otto, and then Otto and
So,
Sylvia.
how did you find, because I think historically the family did not know what happened to the grandmother, right? Like Sylvia didn't know where her grandmother was.
Right.
Where was the family versus where Ernestine was?
Ernestine was in Oregon, and she and her husband and some of her sons were homesteading in Oregon. And meanwhile, Otto Plath was a professor, and he was in Boston. And so he was not at all, I mean, he was across the country.
So, Ernestine and her husband, who's Otto's father,
Right.
they are from the East Coast, but they decided to homestead out in Oregon, correct?
She was hospitalized and died there. And even though her family lived close by, her husband had died before her. And what I found by looking in the files is that the state hospital tended to have a point person, a contact person. And so if this contact person were to die or neglect to share with the family, the information with the family, that's where a lot of that communication ended. And I think explains a lot of why ashes were unclaimed.
I mean, that's a lot of work for the hospital in a time when connecting was difficult.
So it wasn't surprising.
And I would suspect if dad has gone and the kids are trying either to make their way or, are not around, perhaps that was the best decision. But I think over time, though, where she was got lost in memory, right? People didn't know where Ernestine was.
Right, right. They didn't. And for me, it was actually incredibly easy to find because I started out with Ernestine.
Yeah, you came at it this way, not
Right.
trying to go back and go, where could she be?
Right. I
know?
wasn't looking for her.
Yes, yes.
I had her name, her death date, and so she was easy to find, and it was easy to connect her with relatives because I just did a search on Ancestry, put in her name, and because I had her death certificate from the archives at that point, I knew her father's name. So I knew her maiden name was Kotke. And I knew her husband's name, and her name was Plath. And so those are rare names.
Yes. I mean, and Plath, they probably all the flags went waving like, wait a minute,
And so I just put her name in there, and boom, here comes a marriage license. And first thing there, and there's her name as her maiden name and her husband's name being the parents of the groom, who's Otto Plath.
Oh my goodness.
And so Otto Plath, a quick Google of Otto Plath, because it said he was an instructor. And I thought, oh, this deserves a little Google. And boom, Otto Plath, Sylvia Plath,
oh my
boom,
goodness.
boom, boom. It was...
Tell me about that moment, though. Like, I know when I've had those moments of A, you found something you're looking for or didn't even know you're looking for, but B, the connection. Like, were you by yourself? Did you kind of yelp? Like, what was the moment?
Yeah, I was probably in my usual position, which is being on the couch with my feet up, probably in my pajamas. I don't know.
The best way to do family history.
And I'm thinking, oh, wow, this is really interesting. And at that time, the podcast process had already started. They'd already started looking for possible candidates to highlight. And I'm thinking, oh, wow, this is probably interesting.
I remember that. So let me go back a little bit of the podcast situation. So back to James Wright. When I discovered this story, I did a whole reveal with the descendant, with the grandson. Over the years went by after that. And then the idea of a podcast came around. And back in the day of podcasting was kind of new when we were looking into that for Ancestry. And we were trying to think what would be a compelling story to tell that's an audible only, because back then, again, it was all just a sound. There was no video. But what would be really interesting where it would have multiple layers. And I proposed, guys, I have this amazing story of the Oregon State Hospital of discovering this, person who was lost from the family. And so they took that idea and then they created what is now Unclaimed, the podcast. And so I remember saying, you have to contact Phyllis because she's the reason I found the story because of all the work you've done on Find a Grave. And I said, I know she's got to have more stories. There's got to be places because I saw all the posting that you had done at that point. So they took that story and they crafted all of the different episodes around the Oregon State Hospital. So podcasts back then were a little different than they are now. It was new. It was very episodic, just presented in a very different way. And so when we were creating and figuring out episodes, you contacted us and said, I just found Sylvia Plath's grandmother. And I remember being, I like woohooed. So when I ask you how you react, sometimes I wish there was someone next to me when I make a discovery so I can say, I found this thing, I found this thing.
Well, but it was funny because I wasn't sure that you'd want to use this. And now in hindsight, it's like, oh, well, that was silly. People had contacted me while working on the podcast for a list of candidates who had good stories and so forth. And I had provided a bunch of stories. And by that time, I had not discovered Ernestine Plath. So the whole process was up and running. I felt like, oh, now am I going to throw a monkey wrench into this process? Sent out a little email and said, hey, what do you think? And I think I started it by saying, I have this woman whose life is not all that compelling by itself, but you might want to have a little change up here. And she's Sylvia Plath's grandmother.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, you buried the lead. But I remember very clearly being like, oh my goodness, this is crazy. And I remember we quickly pivoted and we're like, oh, that is an episode for sure. Everyone was very excited about that. And I mean, that's history, right? You've just made history.
Well, about 2 minutes after I hit send, the phone rang.
Yeah.
is this real?
Yes.
Are you sure?
Yes, yes. It was our team. It was our team. And I think our communications, all of us were just like, can you believe this? This is insane. And it all of a sudden became not just a story, not just, an Ancestry podcast. It became newsworthy because that's something that I think has been a mystery. So to be able to solve something that people have been claiming is not solvable is kind of amazing. Tell me, since filming the episode, since we did the episode for the podcast, what has happened that's not in the episode?
I was hoping, like everyone else, that the family members who had been contacted might claim the ashes. And they didn't. And they didn't. And after a couple years, I said, okay, I'm just going to do my usual. And I'm going to identify living relatives that haven't already been identified. And I'm going to reach out to them. Ernestine Plath's great granddaughters and also her grandson. So I reached out to them and they spoke among themselves, and a granddaughter, a great-granddaughter claimed the ashes.
So she is somehow back with family.
She is.
There are a lot of amazing endings to finding these different folks, whether it be the funerals that you talked about or having some kind of gathering around this person. What's one of your favorite stories?
There's so many. Sometimes I really am touched by the personal stories that people talk about, just what it means to them as individuals. Like they'll say, I've struggled with mental illness, and I realize I'm not alone. I'm not the only one in my family, and I see where this is coming from. And for them to have that aha moment because they've received a letter. And so that's really heartwarming. Or there'll be forgiveness stories where they'll say, okay, now I understand my father because I understand his father.
Family history can be healing. Like researching your family, your ancestors, their stories can be very healing for you in a way you never even knew. It can actually give you more empathy for just people in the world and what they're dealing with, right?
Absolutely. One group that I really have enjoyed researching are the suffragettes. And, going back to what you were saying about women and how they were treated historically or viewed historically, um, perhaps for having opinions or whatever, I have found 3 suffragettes who have been institutionalized. And it was really heartwarming to find a great niece who claimed one of the suffragettes. And when she got the letter, she wrote to me and she said, "This explains everything." It talked about her life and what she has dedicated herself to, and her daughter, and how her daughter is someone who's out there seeking justice. And
It's funny, right?
She said all the pieces have come together.
Yes, it's funny how things align sometimes, just with genetically. And she was never around this woman. She didn't even know she existed.
Absolutely.
And here she has this very similar point of view, very similar experience. I've seen that a lot. I've seen that in my own family, and it's very powerful.
Yeah.
It's very powerful.
So, hearing from living relatives who now they connect with someone they never knew.
I love that. I love that. Another episode of the podcast has a story of some mismatched identities. And we have an update.
Thomas Randall, he was institutionalized. He had seizures, very severe seizures. And back in the day, that was often how somebody might get into an institution. And he died. And ashes were sent to his family. They were not his ashes.
Oh.
So his family put the ashes in a niche in a cemetery.
They didn't know it wasn't his ashes.
No.
So the wrong canister was sent. Is
Yes.
that essentially? Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
And I believe they ran across my find grave, which at that time was a shell. I had not gotten to research him. And I think that is what motivated them to connect with the hospital. And they found that I had researched him and I put the bio online. By then, they had also figured out that somebody else's ashes were in his crypt.
So who is this extra person, Phyllis?
And, well, the family contacted me and said, hey, would you help us figure this out? And they were good researchers to begin with, so they were a great team to work with. We figured out her name was Carrie Moody, and I was able to find living relatives for her. However, they were at first interested in claiming the ashes, and then that kind of fell apart. But by then, one of Thomas Randall's daughters, who'd been involved in this whole saga all along, was kind of, I think perhaps she was bonded to Carrie.
She felt like it was her family. She had buried her, and oh, that's sweet.
And so Carrie will be placed in a niche with Sue when Sue dies. Oh. So Sue has made arrangements for that to happen. The other day, I sent Sue pictures of Carrie from her file. And so she says, oh, well, now I know who I'll be spending eternity with.
So that update that's not in the podcast. That's
right.
New information.
Right.
And so he has the correct cremains have been given to the family and been buried.
Yes.
Okay.
They've been placed in a niche with his name on it.
Okay.
He is where he needs to be.
With his family, which is fascinating because, I mean, that's 3,500 different, people that they're accounting for. So if you have someone displaced from a family member, it's no wonder that all of these cremains were left and forgotten. And, it's kind of ironic that we have our podcast, which was also shelved for a time. Isn't that kind of like...
I have thought that same thing. The analogy between these people who were on a shelf and then eventually returned to family, and this podcast that was on a shelf and eventually made public.
Recently, I got to listen to it again, and just hearing the way that we're telling the story and the dynamic, interesting stories that we chose to tell. Michael Douglas is on the podcast, which is incredible. I remember hearing that we got Michael Douglas, and I did not know that he produced One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And again, 50th anniversary this year. And we had already decided and gone through the motions of releasing the podcast long before we realized it's the 50th anniversary this year. So everything seemed to kind of work out the way it was supposed to work out. And I think through Ancestry and Find a Grave and through all these beautiful resources online, we can find ways to connect the dots. We can find ways to find and discover information that we didn't know was there. And in fact, a new tool on Ancestry that I introduced you to, Ancestry Networks, does just that. I wish I'd wish Phyllis had networks years ago when she first started to get it all in there. So Ancestry Networks enables people to document and connect those folks that are around your family member. So not those that are directly related, like parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, but people around them, such as those who are from the Oregon State Hospital, those 3,500 people. Who are all those people? How are they connected? For me, it was my grandfather and his B-17 bomber crew from World War II. I know from my friend Nika, who's also in the podcast, Nika Sewell-Smith. For her, it's a group of enslaved people in Louisiana and Arkansas, and how are they connected and related, or who owned them at once upon a time? Where did they end up? So Ancestry Networks is a way to connect those dots of people that are not genetically related to you. And it has galleries and tools that can help you connect and label and attach how this person's connected to this person. It's a really amazing tool. And I honestly can't think of a better representation than this story of Oregon State Hospital. So how did you, before networks, how did you gather and connect this information? I'm imagining it's some huge spreadsheet somewhere.
Well, there is a spreadsheet. That's my starter collection of names and, when did I research them and did I get a response from the family? And
Do you create trees for all of the different people that you research, or how do you keep track or tell their stories? What do you do with those?
I actually start a narrative, and that helps me keep track of who did what when and what was going on. Um, and I also keep kind of a bare bones word processing program where I'm indenting every generation. So I can look back and I can see these families that way.
So you're creating timelines probably for family, you're creating family narratives, charts of who the descendants are and where they are. You are putting them on Find a Grave. And that means it gets hinted to ancestry trees, which is where people can find their family. As far as the cremains, how many at the time when you started this process had been returned or notified to family members versus now when we're filming here today? Has there been a lot more return? What's the story?
I don't know how many had been returned before I started. Not very many. Now I've managed to return about 1,300.
Oh my goodness, Phyllis, 1,300 of those
1,300.
35 that were originally found, 3,500?
Mhm.
Wow, what a legacy. And truly, what a legacy. Like I'm in awe that you just decided to do this because it felt right. It felt needed. And you just stepped in and now you've become this person that's the go-to person for the hospital to find family. And you've just helped so many people have answers to questions that they just didn't even know they had questions about. I love that.
Thank you.
And I know there's a memorial wall that's at the hospital where all they've made. So if someone chooses to leave the cremains there is a place for them.
Yes, and it's beautiful. It was very artistically done. Each person has a disc that has their name on it. It has their hospital's best guess at their birth year and they do know their death year. There for a while, the design of the memorial was to, when somebody's ashes were claimed, that they would take the urn out and they would put in a brass sleeve. And so the brass would shine the sunlight through the wall. And so it was quite beautiful.
Yeah.
And quite touching. The trouble is that meant the disc would have to come out. And at first it worked just fine. But then so many were returned that the structural integrity of the wall became compromised. So they had to get a plan B. They have a group of volunteers before the ashes are sent back to families who do rubbings of the discs. And that's one of the things that are included. The family will get the ceramic urn that holds the ashes. They get the copper can, the very specific copper can that used to hold the ashes with the correct number on top, and then they get the rubbing of the disc.
Wow.
And it is beautiful. There's floor-to-ceiling glass where you can look in at these copper cans. It does give you the same sense of, oh my goodness, look at how many people we're talking about. And the copper is gorgeous. And every one of those copper cans have aged differently. So every one of those copper cans is unique.
Just like every person's story is unique and every person that is represented with those copper cans has a story.
Yes.
And I love that you would not let that go unfound, undiscovered. And that was just something you felt you had to do. No one asked you to do it. No one was looking for it, But the fact that you said, I want to do this, I want to let people know what their story is and honor these people. That's just so admirable and amazing.
Thank you.
I'm just in awe of that. And I want to be like Phyllis. That's what I want to do. I want to find a way to share those stories with people when I find those people. And I totally understand when you see those names on a paper, you're like, I don't want to turn the page. I want to make sure someone else sees those names. And so thank you so much from my own experience, from so many that you have touched over the years with your work, with your kindness, with your sensitivity, in connecting those people back with their families. So very much thank you.
Oh, thank you. It's been my pleasure and my joy to do this.
I just want to remind people that the podcast is available now. It's called Unclaimed by Ancestry, and you can find it anywhere that you listen to your podcast. Phyllis, you're featured on a few episodes. I love it. Again, thank you so much for talking a little bit behind the screen. And I hope that this inspires people to not just listen, but to want to go find out more about their own family history. And maybe there's a project like Phyllis that they want to do, like you, to go help someone else, that they have some information that they can share and put that out into the world. So thanks again.
Thank you.
We want to thank Phyllis Zegers for being here with us on Behind the Screen for Ancestry's Unclaimed. Hopefully this inspires you to start your own family tree on Ancestry, look into our billions of records online. Just like we said, those organ death records are now available on Ancestry where they weren't before, so we always are updating. In fact, we add millions of records every week to Ancestry. So if something's not there that you think you need, come back, it just might be there. So start your family tree on Ancestry, take a look at those records, and hopefully you'll be inspired to start your own project.